and my wife is my best friend, and there are very few things that I could even think of that I wouldn't share with her. What I'm saying is that that sort of family bit of being committed to one another is what God has been continuing through Christ to chase us down for. Like, come to me, come to me. I want to have this kind of relationship with you, and it's amazing. Well, Mark, welcome to Testimonies of Triumph, and appreciate you coming on and being willing to share a little bit of God's story in your life. If you and I don't know each other, I had a chance to review an application, right, which just means words that you wrote, which is great. But I also understand that there's some probably pretty relatable things that have happened in your life, and I would love to kind of get back to before. What was life like before any sort of chaos? And did you grow up in a church? Did you grow up in a Christian home? Those kinds of things, and then where does the conflict start in your life, and what was the conflict? What was the impact of the conflict?
Okay, well, I'm an old guy, as you can obviously see. I was born in the first half of the last century,
Okay.
which means I was born before 1950.
Yep.
And yes, I did grow up. Matter of fact, my father was a lay pastor in the Methodist Church.
Okay.
So I did grow up in a Christian home. Of course, they were big in those days on preaching the gospel. And I think I would have been about 8 years old when I asked the Lord to come into my life and, save me and redeem me.
Yeah.
Now, children can understand that. It's real simple. I have found later in life, particularly right now, that the children understand it better than the majority of adults.
Yep.
So, having said that, I grew up in a Christian home, but when I got in high school, I kind of was a lonely person. I didn't really have any, matter of fact, I didn't have any lifelong friends. To this day, I don't have old friends that are from school days
Okay.
that I have any contact with, not even one person. Now, I went to a Bible college in Iowa, and I met this woman. I was almost 20 years old. Well, to make a long story short, we were married in 1969, and we went through a training experience, and then we were pastors for about 3 years and dropped out. And that's when the trouble started. I was married to this woman for 20 years, and it was not a happy marriage, and it soon turned into a days of wine and roses relationship.
Hmm.
And I remember we were in Kansas City. I was sitting in a sidewalk cafe at what's called the Country Club Plaza. If you've ever been there, you'll realize what it is. It's America's first shopping center, and you can Google it and read
Sure.
about it. It's a fascinating place. It's done in Spanish Mediterranean architecture. Beautiful place, has fountains and nice restaurants and shops and so on. I'm sitting in this sidewalk cafe listening to live music, and this waitress walked by with a drink on a tray. And I said, "What's that? That looks good." She told me what else. I said, "Give me one of those." And then I'm one of those people that I believe I was addicted from the first drink and didn't know it. It created an itch in me that nothing else could scratch.
Okay. I can appreciate that.
And I found that when I drank, it made me feel very a great sense of euphoria
Yep.
that I didn't get anywhere else. I didn't get that in church. I didn't get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I discovered, and I often say, the only thing I have ever done in my life religiously was drink
Yeah.
because of what it did for me.
Yeah.
I didn't see what it was doing to me.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me once upon a time, "Well, I remember seeing you in bars." Said you were always quiet. You never caused any trouble. And I says, "No, I always drank alone. There's a difference."
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to make people mad when you're all by yourself.
Well, that's correct. But anyway, my wife, who 20 years later became my ex-wife,
Yeah.
not only drank but used drugs up to the point of IV drugs, uh, using substances that you have probably never even heard of, which is
Maybe.
very expensive. And I calculate the last 5 or 6 weeks that we were together, she had spent somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 on drugs.
Wow.
Um, she was going to what's called shooting parlors,
Interesting.
where you have a bunch of people sitting around shooting up and sharing needles, which made
Yeah,
me a candidate for HIV.
for sure.
And I remember talking to my mother on the phone saying, "I think you better pray for me."
Yeah.
So I went and had this health test done at the health department, and it turned out negative. But by that point, we were already separated.
Okay.
I had talked to an attorney friend of mine who I probably have the fastest divorce on record in the state of Illinois. From the time of the initial appearance before the judge till final disillusionment was exactly 30 days.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's unheard of.
yeah, it is. And I received custody of 3 children that I had. Um, she went on within a week after the divorce was finalized. She married another man, and yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, exactly. Well, she continued to use, and so and but she had a her life was cut short because of that. Just put it bluntly,
Yeah.
she's been gone for several years now, and she died prematurely.
How old were the
So,
kids? How old were the kids when she passed?
well, I had one in high school, one in middle school, and one in grade school.
Wow.
The youngest was 7.
And
So
just curious,
when she
how long after your divorce with her had you been single dad, the sort of I don't know closest to consistent thing in their lives before mom passed?
well, I probably was the only consistent thing all along and didn't realize it. And
Okay.
it was really strange because at home, I didn't notice anything different as far as the care of the children.
Okay.
And it
That's
occurred to me, I was
fascinating.
not only, in
Yeah.
the end, I was not only father, I was mother.
Yeah. Wow. It's
So,
quite a heavy
and
load.
that had been going on for years. But, this is life is so much better. It's so much different today. And we'll get to that in a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Uh, but what happened, I had a friend who, married couple that we knew in Illinois. And one day they were talking, and she says, "But Mark drinks." And her husband said to her, "Yeah, but if I was married to her, I would drink too."
Oof. Oof. That's rough.
so, so, and I'm not saying that to justify any of my bad behavior,
Sure.
uh, but it was a way for me to deal with a whole lot of pains, because one thing that alcohol does, it's a very effective analgesic, which means it's a painkiller.
Yeah.
It's heard a doctor say once that alcohol was the most successful drug ever invented or discovered because it does exactly what it's designed to do.
Yep. Yeah. There's truth in the label for sure. In my brain, I have that you and your wife. Correct me if I'm wrong. So in my brain, I have you and your wife went to a Bible college, got some training to be lay pastors or similar. Things didn't quite work out. You ended up taking up a
No, we were
substance.
we weren't just lay pastors. We were fully ordained ministers.
Okay, fully ordained ministers. Okay, that's helpful. And so, fully ordained ministers trying to get along in a marriage that maybe wasn't so great, had children along the way, and the entire time the substance abuse from both you and your wife was more extreme, or kind of stayed consistent, or what?
All of the above.
Okay, okay, all right,
Yeah, really, all of the above. It's
okay,
I'm just gonna say something that people haven't experienced don't get, but I hope you'll understand this. It's not how much you drink, it's what it does to you.
okay. You want to expand.
It's
You want
not
to.
how much drug you use,
Yeah,
it's what it does to you. Some people have different tolerances just simply because of their body chemistry and makeup.
sure,
Some people, can really pack it away. Some people might take twice as much alcohol as someone else and have the same identical effect of someone taking less. And the same
sure,
thing can be true of drugs,
sure.
other drugs, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and then and I think in addition to that is the longer you end up taking drugs or alcohol, the more desensitized your body becomes to the effects of those in some cases as well, right? So sometimes the story gets to be that now you're having to take more in order to kind of get where you were before.
Yes.
Okay.
That's, well, you build up when initially you build up a tolerance. And so you can consume a larger volume of alcohol than when you first started drinking.
Yeah.
But then after a while, it turns on you, and you get drunk with less alcohol.
Hmm.
See, the tolerance, it turns on you and it backfires, and it takes what used to take 6 or 8 drinks. It only takes 3 now.
Oh, fascinating.
That
Fascinating.
that has happened to a lot of people, particularly people that drink for years and then they quit and then have a relapse and go back.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Jordan, you were to say
Hi,
something.
Yes,
my name is Jordan.
yes, Jordan.
And also the effects that it does to each different personality, right? Where one drink, how that changes individuals personally, it also varies. So when you said it's not how it's what it does to you, is some people get really well, it alters and affects our emotions either way, but some people get really lovey-dovey, get relaxed,
Yes,
and then some other
yes.
people get extremely angry.
Yeah.
And some people get, with alcohol, some people become very sad and weep and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
but it's like if you sober up a horse thief, what's what you got is a sober horse thief.
So tell me a little bit about that. So you said it for a reason. I'm just curious why you brought it in. Is that part of your story?
Because there is a deeper problem with all of us that are alcoholics or addicts,
Yeah.
and that problem is reflected in one word: self.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. We're basically selfish people and self-centered people who think we're more important than what we are, perhaps.
Yeah. Interesting.
And and we do it, at all kinds of costs. Sometimes we cheat, we lie, we, do all kinds of things to get our drug of choice, whether it's alcohol or some other drug.
Yeah. For sure. So now you're kind of by yourself with three kids. Still have an alcohol problem, I think. And
No,
no, you don't.
no,
When did you stop drinking?
no. 1989. So it's 35 years ago.
Well,
Um,
congratulations on 35 years.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
that's a massive daily battle, and I guess that I guess that it gets better over time, but the battle I think still rages even 30 years later at times.
Well, what happened, in my drinking career, as I refer to it, not a lot of people wanted to see me.
Oh,
They
really?
they didn't want me from church. I was defrocked. I was excommunicated.
Okay.
They didn't want me after that fact, and it wasn't. They just kind of were. "Hmm,
Yeah.
don't come. We don't want you. We don't really want you here."
Yeah.
They made me feel very unwelcome. Um, but the interesting thing, even through all of that, I did go to church somewhere, not necessarily my home church or
Sure.
home denomination,
Yeah.
but even, and the thing is, I tell people, I tried to stay sober for 9 years. I tried all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I, I even tried going praying about it, and you know what? Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. And God has a plan or order, and He prescribes for us, but we need to respond. See, I had a friend, I quit drinking through Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
It was very effective what happened. I'd gone to the meetings off and on for years, and just didn't click. And one day in 1989, it was June or into May, 1st of June, I walked into a meeting, and there was a young guy there that had relapsed, gone back out, and
Yep.
he was asking for help and yada yada. And there was a woman there talking to him. Everybody else pretty much had left. There was, I don't know, half a dozen people at the most left around after the meeting. And she looked at him, and he was way down from where I was sitting. And she said to him, "You just have never admitted you're an alcoholic, that you're powerless over alcohol." She says, "You just never admitted it."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it was like she was talking to me, not to him.
Oh,
And a, mir-
fascinating.
and a miracle happened right then and there, and I haven't had a drink since.
Wow.
So, can I explain it? No. How does it work? Very well, thank you.
so
But
so
I this it was a divine act. There's no doubt about it. God doesn't have to speak to you in church,
right.
and the truth be known, He speaks at us most often, perhaps when we're somewhere else, and especially when we're alone and it's all quiet.
Yeah.
We're just God's always speaking to us. Our problem is we're too noisy to hear Him.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
For sure. I would agree with that. There've been moments in my life in which I don't like the quiet. And I don't like the quiet because I
Mhm.
don't like what God reveals to me in the quiet. And of that, oftentimes it's the sin in my own life that I get a chance to hear from him in the quiet. And yeah, if we can all be somewhat noisy, maybe we can kind of ignore what else is going on. But it's a very convicting thing, that quiet, for sure.
It is. It is. And the big thing is we need to be listening as well. As a lot of times people pray and they've got a list. We're going to go in and we're going to talk to this cosmic Santa Claus. Lord, give me a job. Lord, give me a new home. Lord, give me a new. Lord, it's a give me prayer instead of thank you.
Yeah,
I love you. Thank you.
yeah,
If I've changed my whole prayer pattern, I've got to consciously pray every morning when I have my quiet time. Thank you. Thank you for what you've done for me. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Amen.
That's fascinating, and I appreciate kind of where you've come and the things that you're saying. I don't know whether or not you're being intentional, but it's very clear to me that there's been this maturity that's occurred in the experiences that you've had, and you're doing things different now because of that maturing process, and that's fascinating. So you get to a point in which you just simply admit that you're an alcoholic. You're done drinking from this particular point on, and then what happens? I mean, is it everything just rainbows and roses, or
No,
okay, all right,
no.
what happened?
You know, it was after I got sober that, I had a friend of mine come up to me and say after that meeting, he says, "Hang on to your seat, you're going for a ride." And it
Okay,
was, that would have been August of, right before Labor Day,
okay,
the end of August. My father died.
hmm,
Okay.
yeah,
Uh, and I had separated at that point. I had the children living with me, and she was in Chicago. And so that was challenging enough in itself. I was working as a custodian for our particular denomination.
okay,
And thank God that the man that was the pastor there had compassion on me and hired me and gave me a job.
yeah,
They needed somebody, and he discovered that I was a pretty effective custodian. I could do the job well.
yeah,
So I'll always be good. And he's gone on to glory since then. He
yeah,
he died a few years ago, but I'm so thankful that he was in my life at the right time.
yeah.
And then in 2000, let me think here, would have been 19, just 30 years ago, 1994. Then I went back into the ministry in Missouri, which is where I met my wife, who just popped in the door.
Yeah, I see her back there.
Say hello to Sue.
Hi, Sue.
I don't know. Wave your hand, Sue, so they can see. Or no, we're not done yet, but thanks. But anyway, I met Sue there, and we wound up getting married, and have been married ever since. We're back in the ministry full. Well, we're retired now,
Yeah,
but we went back in. We were in Wichita for about 14 months, and then a church in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and then uh, Emporia, Kansas. We were there 5 years, 2 years in Iowa, and 4 years back in Missouri, from which we retired and now live in Branson.
you have an amazing experience in which, through your own choices, you were sort of excommunicated from the church. It sounds, um,
Yeah,
eh,
wait.
and you experienced what I would consider very conditional love from the people who espouse unconditional love, which is a little bit strange for me. I get that they removed you from a leadership position, but it kind of sounds like they just didn't want you at church to begin with. And now you get to a point where you've remarried and you've found a way back into ministry. There's something else that happened in there. I mean, goodness gracious,
I didn't do a thing. That was all God. That's all I can say. I just said, okay, let's do it. Um, there's this thing where Jesus said, and we have to be honest. I just had it in my devotions this morning. Take up your cross daily and follow me. He
yeah,
didn't say, you know, I think a lot of times there's way too much cheap grace being preached from pulpits all over, especially in evangelical churches. We're about feel good,
yeah,
and we're about make me successful.
yeah,
And we have preachers. No, we need to hear things like, I'm a sinner and I need a savior.
yeah, yeah,
Amen.
for sure.
There's a heaven to gain and there's a hell to shun.
Yep.
And you can turn this life into a hell on planet Earth if you want to, but
Oh,
God does not want that for you.
yeah, I'm convinced there are a lot of people who've already done that, and that's one of the.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the reasons why God wants to tell His story
a
through
lot of
His
them go
people.
into politics.
Yeah, well, we don't have to go into politics. I'm just saying. I think that we have ejected God from about every other structure, right? He's no longer in school. He's no longer in government. He's no longer in family. And now all of a sudden, here we
You
are.
just hit the nail on the head. He's no longer in family.
Yeah. And because of that, it becomes hell on earth because we don't have a relationship with him and he so badly wants it. So you two just ended up in ministry one day because you woke up and you had heartburn and said this is what's going to have to happen, or did you just simply, I mean, tell me how is it that you would go from being a custodian or other sort of vocations that got you a paycheck to a point in which you said, you know what, I'm going to roll the dice and do this all over again, even though I know what happened the first go round.
Well, it wasn't a matter of rolling the dice. That's dependent on chance.
I'm with you. I appreciate
Don't
this
don't
conversation. I said
don't
it
leave
to spur this conversation.
don't I got it. Don't leave anything to chance. Leave it to the Lord. Leave it in His hands. I didn't get back in ministry right away. I attempted, while I was a custodian, and first try, they were kind of indifferent, and then later on, and it took me 8 years from the time I started that job till the time I actually went to St. Joseph, Missouri.
Okay.
That's 8 years, and I liked my job as a custodian, but I did not feel the spiritual. How shall I say this? I didn't feel like I was really being used. I
Yep.
was used in a sense of providing a nice service,
Sure.
but someone else could have done
Yeah.
and could have done as well.
Yeah.
Although this is kind of interesting, when I left and came back in ministry, they had to hire two people to do what I was doing.
Wow. We're work under the Lord. As if He's your boss. So that's amazing.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And even in the ministry,
Yeah.
I tell people, and some of them raise their eyebrows and don't like it, but we answer to a higher power than our church, our denomination. I'm speaking about denomination.
Yeah.
I
For
answer
sure.
to a higher calling,
Yeah. For sure.
and
Colossians
I'm accountable
3:23,
to Him
right?
first and foremost.
Yep.
I believe that's Colossians 3:23.
Yep.
Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as in working for the Lord, not for
Yep.
human masters.
Yep.
That's correct.
Yep. That's right. That's right, but it's so lost on other people, right? And what's interesting to me is that it almost feels like that sort of commitment and dedication to that kind of quality and service, not to necessarily the local church or the local individuals that were attending that church in your custodial role. Um, all it did was shine what your character really is inside, right? And where your heart has been. And now you get a chance to change vocations, it sounds like, to move from something that you're good at, you work hard at it, but maybe not necessarily maximizes the gift that God has given you. And in that case, I'm curious, what component of this new role for you did you feel like, hey, look, I was underutilized as a custodian or someone else, and now I'm sort of in God's will? What was that?
Wow, that's a loaded question. You know, I did things to remove myself from God's will. You will never hear me say, but there for the grace of God go I, because for the simple reason, God's grace is too often rejected.
What do you
You
mean by
don't
that?
know just exactly what I said. We might see some guy, a derelict on Skid Row in Chicago,
Yep.
and say that, but there for the grace of God go I. But you know what? There was times I rejected God's grace. There's times, and you don't know, but what God's grace has been rejected by that individual time and time and time again. And I guarantee if they're in that state, that is more than likely the case. And it's sad. People make bad choices, and God will do the impossible but he won't do it against our consent.
Yeah.
And if you have studied, I've done some study on covenant, and I'm not an authority, not
Sure.
I'm a long way from that. I'm an amateur at it. I've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
studying a bit of Hebrew.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you understand covenant always, without exception, there's no exception to this, covenant always requires the consent of at least two
Yeah.
parties.
Both parties. Yep. Yeah. For sure.
If covenant's never one-sided.
Nope.
Now, what happened with, if you understand Old Testament times, Israel
Yeah.
broke the covenant, but God never did.
Right. Yeah.
You can break covenant.
Yep.
You can walk away from covenant.
Yep.
God doesn't want that. He wants
Yeah.
his people to come back to him.
Yeah.
And he will go to all kinds of lengths to bring people back into the family.
Yeah.
See, covenant means this, it has this context of family. It's a sense that I belong,
Yep.
that I'm a child of God.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe
It's more than a mere promise.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a relationship, but it's a very deep, intimate, personal relationship that you can't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this: we ought to be closer to God than any human being if we're living right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We ought to be. Listen, there's things I talk to the Lord about. I don't speak to my own wife about.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
And I love my wife.
Absolutely. And you
Sweetheart.
have a covenant with your wife.
I do.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just a different covenant. It's just different.
Yes.
It's just different.
Yes, it is.
But there are a lot of similarities, and that sort of unconditional love and belonging in that covenant for these long-term marriages. Look, I've been married almost 30 years, and my wife is my best friend. And there are very few things that I could even think of that I wouldn't share with her. What I'm saying is that that sort of family bit of being committed to one another is what God has been continuing through Christ to chase us down for. Like, come to me. I want to have this kind of relationship with you, and it's amazing. But you're right. Even though he's chasing people down, going, wait, come to me, they're running away from him, or they're doing something different, or they're ignoring what it is someone has to say. And so I think these are the examples of the grace that you're saying that they passed by. They just didn't pick up along the way.
Yeah. And the tragedy is, John tells us, 1 John chapter 4, he uses this phrase, God is love.
Mm-hmm.
What he's saying is not that that's some kind of an attribute, it's his personality.
Right. Yeah.
God is holy. That is not an attribute. It's his identity.
Right.
It's who he is.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't grasp that. We
Yeah.
just don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a Bible study coming up in January, a series month long on the origin of sin. And everybody's going to say, well, that happened in the Garden of Eden. And I'm going to reply, no, it didn't. That was the origin of sin in human beings,
Sure.
but not the origin of sin. If you look at the Hebrew in Isaiah, where it talks about the fall, in the English Bible, it uses the word Lucifer.
Yep.
In Hebrew, it's Hallel. Here's the scary part. Hallel, El in Hebrew, it means God.
Mm.
In other words, the guy we know as Lucifer
Mm-hmm.
lived in the very presence of God.
Yep.
You know that in Isaiah 6, where the angels are singing and going, holy, holy,
Yeah.
holy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was there. He
Yeah.
was right in the very presence.
Yeah.
And he was created to bear light
Yeah.
not his light, but the light of God through creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that went bad.
Yeah, it
And
did.
that's since Jesus said, I saw Satan, what did he say? Fall
Fall
like
like lightning.
Yeah. Mhm.
lightning strikes fast.
Yeah.
It's instantaneous, it's there and boom.
It's
Hard
hot and
fall.
And
loud.
when it hits, it always does damage.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's that's amazing, and for me, part of your testimony that's really powerful for me, and I don't I, it's just the way I'm reacting to it, is that the church in its own behavior in what I heard was they disciplined you because you made bad choices. Okay, that's fine. But then at the same time as disciplining you, they didn't show you grace in being able to say, hey, look, this place is as open for you as it is for anybody else. Because the relationship with Christ is open for everybody. It doesn't matter if it's this building, the next building, or this community or that community, you're always welcome. You should be here. And you experience that, yet and I'm sure like the rest of us, you've probably made some bad decisions between that and the time getting back into ministry. I've made my own, a lot of them. And then you get into ministry and you get a chance to sort of do it different and point directly toward that relationship and not the sort of legalistic component of, hey, you're not allowed in here and you're not allowed to have this relationship because you made bad choices. Like, you need this relationship because you made bad choices. It should be the other
It
way
would be
around.
it would be nice if we saw on church bulletin boards outside somewhere a sign that says sinners welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, because the house is full of them.
Like,
Come on in. You're going to be
like,
around the rest of them, including the guy who's in the front of the room. He's a sinner too.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I hate to say this, but I think a lot of the problems, the real problem, the real problem with anybody's denomination is the people running it.
It's funny. It's funny you should have this
If you get into all these man-made,
Yeah, absolutely. Church would be great if it wasn't for the people, right?
yes,
I'm with you. And not to mean any disrespect, just simply an observation that we're broken people trying to do humanly stuff with and carry the burden that God has. We just don't. We just not equipped. We can't do it without Him. We can't do it without His grace and without His mercy.
that's
And
exactly right.
and yet we have all these organizations that are like, oh, well, watch me, I can do this, and then they show that they're broken and faulty and that they're not as strong and they're not perfect like the Lord is, and then it becomes this hypocritical environment in which people go, I don't like the church anymore because look at what just happened. They said that they were really great and they're above everything, but look what just happened. Like, we're just making it harder. Why don't we just point to the Lord in all of this and say, look, we're all broken. Come here. Let me show you. Like, you guys have this relationship.
You
I
know
don't
what
know.
all of this is has shown me, or what God's revealed to me
Yeah.
through we've seen this happen with televangelists and others
Hmm.
who are leaders, and they have some kind of a spiritual fall.
Yep.
If anything, God ought to give credence to the fact that the gospel is in fact true. Otherwise, listen, otherwise, those would just simply be events.
Right. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
They would just be events.
Yeah.
Well, he made a mistake,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
why are the people, well, see, they're pointing their finger at someone that's fallen, and instead of getting on the phone, we ought to be getting on our knees
Yeah. Yeah.
and praying for people that are, a matter of fact, we're told to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
James says to do that.
Yeah. For sure.
You know,
Yeah.
it, It's all there.
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, if you had advice to give someone who is either struggling with, I mean, you've lived a lot of life, Mark. There's been a lot of challenge in your life. Pick one or two of whatever those challenges are. Whether it's the struggle with a failing marriage, trying to raise kids by yourself, whether it's alcoholism, or being making bad choices and kind of being broken from the church and then reconciling with the church. And I'm talking about like the big church, not a particular denomination, right? Just the body of Christ. And what advice would you give other people who are struggling with the same thing at the end of the day?
First of all, you're not alone. You're not alone. Second of all, God has an answer and a solution. No matter, I don't know what you think the problem is. It doesn't matter if it's addiction, doesn't matter if your marriage is in trouble, doesn't matter if you're in a financial state of ruin. God will do for you only that which you cannot do for yourself. But he will do it if you will let him, if you will trust him, if you will abandon yourself to him. In other words, we have an old hymn that used to say, I surrender all. You know that? You know that? Know the
I
words?
do. It's been
To
a long
Jesus,
time.
surrender all to him. I freely give.
Yeah.
I will ever love and trust him in his presence daily that I surrender all. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, boys and girls, we all need to do that. There isn't a single person on planet Earth that does not need to do that. And he has the answers, but we have to commit our lives over to his care. If you do that, you're going to see a change in your life. If nothing else, you'll see a change in yourself and in your own heart. And you not only will develop a love for God, you will love other people because of that. So that's my word of advice for what it's worth. And I'll tell you this, if I can add a couple more things here.
Yeah.
I went from being homeless, which I was, to not only today I own my own home with a mortgage on it
Yeah.
still. But this is the third home that I've owned since I retired.
Wow.
I've had two homes prior to this. I just kept changing location and finally got to where I want to be
Yep.
in in beautiful Branson. But the other thing God has given to me, I have two things I'm participating in this right now in the terms of ministry. Number one, I do music ministry via Facebook and YouTube.
Yep.
I I think I sent you
You
some
did. You
videos you
did.
saw.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
hope you like them.
I
I have
did.
about 30, I think I have close to 30 videos on Facebook. Or not Facebook, but YouTube. I
YouTube.
don't know
Yeah.
how many's on Facebook. I belong to a lot of different groups there. I belong to a group called Church Pianist, and there's several others that I put these videos on. The other thing I do, I've written books. Only one of them is published so far,
Yeah.
but I've been given the opportunity. My book is available at a local bookstore here. I'm going to do a book signing there on November 23rd. Can I
Nice.
show the book? Is that all
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
This is it. I don't know if you can see it. There's my pin name. I got to move it there.
There you go.
Wait a minute. Pin name Ozark Mark. The book title, or I don't know how well you can see it. Maybe I should move it
You
back.
know what? I'll put a link to it in the blog post.
But it's
Yeah.
entitled Letters from Saint Nicholas, and it's available now on Amazon, Barnes. All of those places have it. So,
Yeah. Nice.
but if you come to Branson and you're here on the 23rd of November, that's the Saturday before Thanksgiving, go
Yep.
to Fig Tree Books, and I will be there along with a couple other local authors, and we're doing book signings, and we'd love to meet you. I will also be appearing as St. Nicholas, so if you want your picture taken with St. Nicholas, I'm careful not to say Santa Claus. I did
Yeah.
that intentionally for the simple reason Santa is not his name. It never was. His real name was Nicholas, and he was a saint, but he was also a miracle worker. So you get the connection.
Yeah.
Some of the Lutheran churches still have St. Nicholas Festival
Yeah.
and celebrate it, but St. Nicholas was a man of God, and he was there at the Nicene Council back in the 300 whatever ADs. So, but I read his story, and man, you talk about somebody with a powerful life.
Yeah.
God really blessed that man.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, you know what? You have been a blessing to us. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. We will post it and share it as you know as much as we possibly can. And you're an encouragement for sure.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. You have no idea how much I appreciate this. God bless you. And I'm going to say this Merry Christmas, because Christmas needs to be every day for us.
I agree with that. I
It was
agree.
a pleasure to meet you, Mark.
God
Pleasure to
bless
meet
you.
you.
Jordan, bye. Bye bye.